Hey guys, welcome to my little garbage corner of the internet known as the Schizoid Angst YouTube channel. I am Schizoid Angst, and today I am here with a very interesting guest, someone far more interesting than myself because I don't find myself to be all that interesting. So, I am here with somebody that has significant knowledge on a subject that I don't think I've discussed very much on this channel. It's in fact something that I found to be really interesting. A few months ago, somebody introduced me to the subject, and I kind of watched some stuff, read some stuff, and I got lucky enough to come in contact with this person. And now I'm going to allow this person to introduce themselves to whatever degree that they think is suitable.
Yeah, it's cool. So thanks for having me on the show. My name is Sandra McConnell, and I'm an instructor during my day job, but I, on my side, I have a blog site and do some parent coaching, right? So it's not my income driver, but it's all connected to pathological demand avoidance, which is so far placed on the autism spectrum. So my website, if anybody's interested, is www.pdamamabear.com. And and that's my blog and everything about all of that. But that's me in the shortest nutshell possible. And I'm also diagnosed as schizoid as well. So
Excellent. That's
yeah.
part of the reason was this particular, like if you would have just been the mother of a PDA child, that would have been interesting enough to have you on. But just to add that additional element is what makes it like okay, like that's definitely a good pitch to say the least. Um, so the way I wanted to start here is I want because you would obviously know better than myself, kind of a definition or kind of a rundown of what PDA is supposed to be, how it's sort of like how it's kind of what's the word? Not just defined, but maybe diagnosed on a more general sense.
Yeah. So for starters, I always think about the three A's: anxiety, autism, and avoidance. But it's so much more than that, right? It's supposed to be autism, but you have to squint to see it typically. It's really hard to discern that there's autism there unless you look very carefully. Anxiety driven, so rather than aggression driven or anything like that. So it's more like coming from a place of being terrified of the world. And then what they do is interesting is they will avoid just about anything that you ask them to do. And this will turn into worldly demands too, but they will um, say that their legs aren't working or their arms aren't working, or they'll come up with some excuse, or they'll ignore you, or they'll start getting really silly, and just about anything at the end of the day that will help them not do the thing.
What age
Whatever.
range are we talking here? Like this,
Yeah.
obviously, like my arms don't work. Probably not going to be the one they use when they're like 15, you know?
All through life, but mostly for children, right? That's when it gets noticed. That's when it's so problematic. Not that PDA adults are having a party or anything like that. If they haven't been able to access appropriate therapy or whatnot, they may also feel pretty paralyzed by anxiety, right?
Mhm.
And it has to do with the demand of the thing, right? Not that they don't like the thing or whatever, because we all have some of that, but just the fact that something's being asked of them, right? They may even want to do it themselves. It can turn into, I don't think this is natural, but it can turn into somebody who they can't even really get themselves to go to sleep because that's a demand. Like, oh, you're supposed to go to sleep now, so go to sleep. And and they feel tangled up inside and they can't really get past that.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's bad enough for adults, but children can be have some behavioral outbursts where, kind of like an autistic kid, actually, if you poke them more and more and more, and if you get especially more coercive and more threatening, they're not the kind of kid that's going to back down. They're going to double down instead, right? So there's no amount of discipline that ends up really helping them. You can't be, well, you're grounded for a week. That's actually gonna, you're gonna earn that. It's not gonna work. They'll explode eventually, right? My kiddo, when he was in pre-K,
How old are they now, by the way, just so we have a context?
oh yeah, mine's 12 right now.
Okay.
So, and he's doing
Okay.
really well, which is part of the reason I do the coaching and the blog. So, but we've kind of gotten there through a different means than a lot of the traditional PDA parenting advice. And so that's kind of why, that's how I ended up getting my own personal diagnosis and why I approached you. It's because I'm looking at it through the schizoid lens, essentially, right? Like what's going on there. It comes with some other things that are just coincidentally strange that I thought a passive early first year of life, very good, quiet babies, typically, seemingly, yeah, I don't know what's behind that. That's one of the descriptors, but it's not universal. That's not one everybody seems to have. Resisting even the ordinary demands of life, sometimes even things that they wanted to do. Surface sociability, but apparent lack of sense of social identity, pride, or shame. Well, shoot, that sounds really familiar to me when I read that.
Yeah.
That's one of those ones where I was like, oh, that's him and that's me too. Interesting.
Yeah.
Lability of mood, impulsive, led by a need to control. So they're called Jekyll and Hyde sometimes. Mine was a contrarian. If you said smile, he would frown. If you say frown, he'll smile. Kind of just going back and forth, right?
I'm wondering, at what age in your case did it become noticeable?
He didn't start having like behavior meltdowns until pre-K. Now he could have a long tantrum, which looking back was probably a meltdown. But I was seeing signs earlier than that I think only perhaps a mother and only a schizoid mother might see. I was noticing already that before the first meltdown, that he was what I would call differently social. Because I don't know what to call it actually at the end of the day. Even when he was 2, 3, 4, those ages, right? He didn't copy people. You know how when people clap or whatever, you kind of get the clue and you clap with them, kind of thing. He did not do any of that. We tried a couple months of Boy Scouts. The other little boys would run around, the school cafeteria during the meeting or whatever, all together in a group. And mine was off in the corner exploring something, playing with something, right? And I'm like, oh, look at that. He's not going with the group. Interesting. At the first little pre-K Halloween party that they had, all the other kids were super jazzed up, and he looked like so sunken eyes and exhausted and everything. And that stood out to me. I was like, that's different too. He didn't understand other people and having an attachment to their property. But this made him like really awesomely kind. Like he would give his own Halloween candy away at oh, here, you want some? You said you want that, right? So he didn't have property. And I think property is a social thing, honestly. Maybe it's an inborn social thing, I'm not sure, but I think it's still something that I know he didn't come prepackaged with when he was born. But he grew up like wanting to save the lives of ants and bugs and things like that too, which was super cool, right? So you can't look at this child and go, he's just a budding psychopath or something like that. He clearly wasn't, right? So something else obviously was going on there. So yeah.
So is that what ultimately led you to wanting or seek out, like at what age did you seek out, I should get my child evaluated?
After the pre-K meltdowns, because the school's looking at us and they're figure this out, your kid needs to stop doing this kind of thing. And at the time we're like, well, yeah, of course. But he had some ADHD clearly, but that wasn't the only explanation, because he would constantly move and bad impulsive control and things like that. But he would just continue to melt down, and it always had that flavor where the more you pressure him and lean into him, the worse it gets, right? So eventually
it didn't improve with punishment, or even like even a punishment of even a conventionally acceptable kind, like timeouts or things like that. Those were kind of counterproductive.
Yeah. So and we kind of learned how to navigate through all of those things, but it was definitely different than typical parenting, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, so, I assume so.
Then going on with the list, comfortable in role play and pretending, which a lot of times PDA kids, since they're struggling anyway, they'll have to either play a role to either do a demand, well, Batman puts his shoes on, so I'll put my shoes on, or something like that, right? Or they'll do it to not do the demand, either one,
Yeah.
right, kind of thing. But that's something that isn't typically autistic. They usually assume that autistic people don't have a ton of creativity, and PDA kids seem like they've got a lot, right?
Well,
Um,
I would say there's definitely that's a misconception about autistic people in general. They have plenty of creativity,
mm,
but that's yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But
got it.
anyway,
Yeah. So
it's different kind of creativity, is the
yeah.
way I say it. But anyway,
So there's language delay, but it seems like it was a result of the passivity, and then they catch up. Then obsessive behavior, so special interests, just like autistic people, which I've got my own, and my kid has special interests. So,
yeah,
uh, and then it says neurological involvement, which tends to be some of the like the clumsiness may go with it, awkward, different developmental milestones,
yeah,
physically.
like motor skill wise and stuff. Like
Yeah.
growing up, was that some of that stuff sort of a little slower to catch up, but other things were like kind of more sped up?
Well, interestingly, he was hyperlexic. He was gifted with letter recognition and reading, and his math too, for that matter. But he didn't read facial expression. So kind of like going back to how he
Hmm.
didn't copy people either. He, I would be testing this because I'm a little psychologist at heart. I would look at something, and usually if somebody's paying attention to you and you look, they'll kind of try to see what you're looking at. And he didn't do any of that. But now that he's 12, he can, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but more or less normal. Like walking was normal, talking, I guess, was normal ish, kind of thing. So yeah, but so
Yeah.
so nothing screamed like, autism, obviously, kind of thing. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
All right. I see. Yeah. Yeah. Autism is a complicated thing, especially since there's so many variables that are kind of included in the package that might not necessarily have to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot of people make the assumption that autism equals learning disability when it doesn't, in many ways. So what I did want to ask is, uh, so now that you've kind of said what PDA is supposed to be and some of the general understandings of how a professional might diagnose it, I'm curious to how maybe your beliefs or your thoughts pertain, but based on your lived experience, obviously having a child and also having a maybe similar kind of relatable behavior, being someone that's schizoid. I'm wondering what your interpretation of PDA is. I know there are a lot of kind of a lot of contention there among people that have it, and the clinical community about the wording, PDA, the way it's actually said, a path as it be pathological and so on. I know there is a different form of saying that it seems to be more popular among people that actually deal with it, which is if I remember correctly, it's was it pervasive or no persistent drive for autonomy.
Yeah. That's another one.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's like the more popular one I come across, at least within like groups that or communities on the internet that discuss their issues with it with each other. So, what are your thoughts? How do your thoughts maybe differ a bit from um,
My
from?
thoughts are well, first of all, I don't know if schizoid and PDA, like, I'm not asserting that they're the exact same thing. So I don't know. I'm either saying there could be some overlap, and if there's not, even if you don't want to call it overlap, there's things that we could steal, from understanding it. So that's what I bring to it, is that everything about PDA, first of all, it's like as young as 1980, which in psychological time is not long at all. And schizoid's been around like so much longer, right? So that's one thing. But PDA is so behavioral right now, right? They're just very, they talk about surface sociability. That's almost like where they tend to live, right? Is, in terms of talking about it. They will talk about, a drive for autonomy. And so that's something that's a little bit, beyond skin deep, obviously. So, but I take it a little bit further, and I then go through the schizoid lens and look at the development of the self, right? And a lot of the stuff about the true self and the false self, and I know, Dr. Eleanor Greenwood's way of describing,
Greenberg. Sorry,
Greenberg.
not
Oh,
to.
sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
No, you're good.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, she really emphasized the safety aspect, right? And the safety of the self, right? Um, that's how I looked at it. And that's actually before I even had gotten myself diagnosed with schizoid, that was my recognition. I was like, I knew what he needed. So one of the things that they recommend for PDA, for example, is low demand environments, which I think can help, right? So I'm not like actually not ripping up, core PDA ideas or
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
like that, but I think it kind of accidentally helps. Because I think what happens is you end up accidentally providing psychological safety through providing environmental safety, right?
Got it.
And in my head, I just went to psychological safety. I even say I go so far as to say that in my household, we never went low demand, quote unquote, but we're not dinner is at 6 every day kind of people anyway. So we're kind of, pretty easy going about that anyway. Um, but my approach kind of through my own recognition of what I thought he needed was less use of myself to try to force him to do things. There's less expectation about, well, you're part of a society and you're supposed to do this, right? And you have to go to school. And like I wasn't using either society nor myself as a blueprint. And I knew that if I did, he would be able to feel that, right?
Mhm.
And that there would be, and as long as I knew that my role was not to use, not to try to force myself and my ideas on him, I could provide more psychological safety, right? Which is kind of like, what's so important to the schizoid. You could say it's because, the extreme need for autonomy or weak sense of self, or, in developing self, whatever you want to call it. Either way, it felt right to try to not be intrusive
Mhm.
in my relationship with him.
So would you say that having similar what's the word, not attributes, but similar motivations, similar sort of anxieties
Mhm.
that perhaps even your young child was experiencing that were relatable to you? Would you say that helped you navigate what could possibly be their needs a lot easier?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. So just kind of understanding that just from like I said, a different angle, similar to the way PDA, those recommendations, but from a different angle of the self. It just kind of it fed my entire approach towards him. I think of schizoid relationships as being kind of offstandish but warm, and it feels very safe to me, and we have that kind of awesome relationship. Like, I wouldn't, nobody would be able to recognize him as PDA to see us interact. Right.
Mhm.
I can ask him, do the dishes. I can,
Well, if they saw
but
you interact with somebody outside, like with neurotypical people, be like, wow, that's a really odd mother son kind of dynamic.
I agree that they would probably say that.
Yeah, would they say that? That's what
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
Yeah. I think they
Would they
do
say,
say,
oh, they're almost like how would they what how do you think people would say about the way you interact with your son that is conducive positively to their own individual needs that somebody else might think is kind of odd.
they would see that it works. So they'd have to, kind of begrudgingly, right? Because, like I
Yeah.
said, we get along, which is great. Um,
But just say they didn't know that your son had PDA or that they're just running under the assumption that oh it's just a mom and her son. Like is there kind of unique sort of
tell anything.
dynamics?
I don't know. I don't know if they'd be able to tell anything just by examining,
Okay.
looking at us. It's when we talk, when we compare notes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think traditional parenting and parents, well, I know this because I talk to parents, will often have the idea that, they want their child to have this and their child needs
Mhm.
this and needs to go to school. And, it just, and I can't fault them. I mean, that's what society is driving people to do, right?
And that's
Almost
probably what
universally.
might be good for the average kid.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
but not the PDA kid for sure, right? One of the things that I do in my interactions with him and also my husband, which is, how that relationship works out for that matter, is like we don't use emotions to convince each other. And I think that's kind of
Mm.
different, from the negative ones to the positive ones, right? You have to do this. If you do that one more time, like that's an emotional.
I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, right.
Okay.
um to even like, oh, I hope you'll do this, which isn't negative. It's just, I would love it if you would do this thing with me, right? I would love it if you'd go to the store with me, or kind of thing. Even those, like, I've had people try to use those kinds of emotions on me, and I hate it every single time they try to do that. It feels cheap. It feels like weaponizing emotions. um
Yeah.
so
It's like an obligation's being sugar coated, right?
yeah. Right. And and that's why I self-identify as PDA, is because it feels like being coerced, right? Feels like an intrusion. Um, but from my perspective, I like my perspective, right? Like I don't feel like I should be like them, right? Kind of thing. Our relationship works in our family.
So
Uh,
I was actually, I know it's a little separated. Sorry to interrupt. It just
no, it's cool.
so many questions popping into my head. I really want to ask them in the limited time we have. And the one is like, because you mentioned you have a husband, you said.
Yep. Mhm.
I'm wondering if you have like has he taught himself or learned how to basically request things of you without basically using these means that you said that you yourself would be averse to.
I think he's naturally, like, I don't think he'd be diagnosable, but he's so chill that he doesn't naturally use those things anyway. And that's been something that has really helped us get along. We've been married for 20 years, right? And so anything in me that's controlling, or that I want to, I have a certain way that I want to do things, or I don't like being, forced into doing things, he approaches me in a similar way that I approach my son, right? And then
Hmm.
we all approach each other the same way, right? Like, I don't feel like he's ever trying to leverage an emotion. Like, we stay very logical. We're very logical people up here, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
um if we're going to do something or convince another person, each other, to do something, right, we're going to do it on the merits of the thing.
Well, you're gonna make kind of pose an argument as to why it's a good idea. Like you're gonna
Yeah,
say like
yeah,
this is why I think it's a good idea and I think we should do this.
yeah,
And
make your
then
claim, present your evidence,
yeah. And then it's up to the other person to decide whether they want to join in,
Yeah.
right? So if so that's interesting. I'm trying to think of situations in which that might be the case. But like, it's something as simple as because if you're dealing with like say you have to take your son to the store with you because you can't just leave your son at home, right? And because you guys are both leaving, right? How would you go about wording like the fact that there really isn't an option whether they get to just stay home by themselves or not, that they must go.
Well, the track record of the relationship helps a lot here, and then also infuse other things into it that are still worldly. Like, you're not
Mhm.
using them. You can kind of half jokingly say, well, if I leave you here, they're going to arrest me. So that's not going to work, right? And then you're going to starve, kind of thing.
Yeah, so
So, let's go get in the car. Come on, right? Kind of thing. We'll make it as quick as we can go, right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. You basically explain the reasons for why it's just not a viable option
Mhm.
to leave them there because
Yeah.
you might start because I know one of the things I wanted to actually hear a little bit about this. I know one of the behaviors or conditions or whatever you want to call it regarding PDA is that oftentimes the PDA person doesn't they especially when they're a kid they have a hard time differentiating between um, you're an adult and I'm not an adult.
Oh yeah.
It's like we're both just people with needs and stuff and like I want this you want like they don't see authority figure parent dad mom is the person who I listen to. I hear they negotiate a lot with
Yeah.
their own parents.
Yeah. which is encouraged in our
Yeah.
household. Like we
Yeah.
taught, we purposely taught that. One of the things that I think helps, and this is where I don't know if neurotypical people can bring themselves to do this, but I don't think of myself as his mom, and therefore I am his controller and master because I'm the mom, right? So I align more closely with him. Now, maybe that's just natural because of my schizoid diagnosis, right? Kind of thing. Like, I feel like I've always been like that. My husband took a little bit of convincing, right? Because he's, like I said, he's super chill, but I don't think he's schizoid. But so, I mean, it's like, yeah, like that's totally true, right? I don't respect hierarchy based on position and title, kind of thing. It's like, if I'm going to follow somebody, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to follow a recommendation or blah, 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 it had better be right. Like, I don't care what your title is, right?
And that
And,
includes mom or dad.
huh?
I said, and those titles include mom and dad.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't even give myself the hierarchy, which I
Yeah.
think, is why we all get along so well. I think a lot of parents still, like, they believe in the hierarchy, and I don't know how easily it would be for them to actually adapt and become more like their kiddo. And
Yeah.
it'd be like, why would I think, because this is truly how I
Yeah.
philosophically believe. Why would I think any part of me gets to force any part of him into either thoughts or behavior or identity, right? Like just based on just that. I don't feel entitled to that at all.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like if I'm gonna, you know, my job is to teach him, right? To mentor and teach him. But going back to that, if I'm going to teach him something, it better damn well make sense, right? And so it raises the bar on me for sure, but I ascribe to that. Like, I don't want baseless power. I don't deserve. I don't think I deserve baseless power.
Yeah.
And
No.
you know,
Well, I would posit that I think there's a lot of parents that they don't I don't think they're necessarily functioning on this idea of baseless power, but they don't see a reason as to why they should have to explain themselves to their child. Even if, like, say their motivations are noble, as in the protection of the child, the well-being of the child, the whole "I know what's best for you" kind of attitude. Um, and they might actually know what's best, like in some ways, right? But what I'm wondering is maybe is this sort of about explaining the best that the information that you possess that they don't to the child? Like, if, like, if they're lacking, say, context or information as to why they should be doing this thing, or why this is a good idea to do, is explaining it to especially a PDA child something of use?
oh yeah, definitely. Like
Okay.
that's the whole way to parent, which when you which is, first of all, it's a long road, it's a long game, right? You're playing a long game. You're a kid between, like, kindergarten to, I don't know, like 7, 8, 9, 10, right? It just, their synapses are not fully snapping, right?
Yeah, because they're still
There's a lot of
developing, their
loosening,
brain's still developing, the
right?
toddlers. And
Right.
yeah.
But there's not a lot of unilateral direction. Like, we'll take clothing as just an early one. It's like, my kids go out wearing their shorts, right? And I guess that's a thing sometimes. And it's like, you're gonna get cold, right? But do I make them go change? No, absolutely not. And so,
So they to learn the lesson themselves of,
yeah,
like, when
they,
they eventually get cold.
if they insist,
Would you pack along, like, a pair of pants just in case they
might,
decide, "I'm cold,
I
mommy,"
might, yeah.
and then you
And
could offer the pants?
I might teach that too. Like, I would actually, and that this rings very familiar. I've done this multiple times. You can take it in the car, and then if you don't need it, you don't need it. Like, it's just there in the car, right?
Mm.
But if you discover that you're cold, it'll be there, right? And so, and then that will help you enjoy this thing, whatever it is this thing is that we're doing together, right? And so, again, make your claim, present your evidence.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because then the next time, um, you suggest or mention, oh, do you want to get some pants on? They're going to be like, yes, because last time I was cold when I didn't.
No, they need to when they're in those younger ages,
Yeah.
they'll make that same mistake.
Oh no, they're gonna keep making it. They're gonna keep making. No, yeah, when they're that little, yeah,
Yeah,
of course. But what I'm saying is that eventually it'll sink in. I'm guessing
yeah,
at some point or another, unless they're getting upset with the cold for taking away their autonomy, because you know,
right. Well,
damn you cold, making me wear pants. I don't want to.
yeah.
Uh, but that goes a different path there. Um, so just to get into a little bit further here, I want to know a little bit about your own experiences, right? So a couple of things. I would like to know what your own experiences are childhood wise when it comes to, because you say you kind of relate to your child as
Mhm.
they've gotten older, some of their behavior, some of the stuff they question, some of the stuff they deal with. A lot of it's been relatable to your own experiences. I'd like to know how was that the case? Maybe a few key points or anecdotes pertaining to your own upbringing and difficulties that you're comfortable talking about.
Oh, yeah. So I did not understand people. Well, actually, let me back up. I was doing maladaptive level fantasy, thinking by the time I was 5. And even then, I didn't know that to kind of conceal that. I would, at any given time, I was obsessed with one TV character, and they were my favorite, right? And I would binge the shows as much as I could in secret. And then any of my free time, I would spend in my own head, reimagining the episodes and things like that, and sometimes creating new ones. I did
Putting
that all
yourself
the
in them sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah. I did that into my 30s, right? This is actually the first time right now I can't say I have a character, and it feels really weird. So I've had characters into I'd say about age 40. I've always had one. Um, so that, kind of with the PDA thing with the role play and everything, that I was like, oh, that's kind of a little bit of a convenient overlap. I had early anxiety that had no reason for it. It just showed up one day like a switch. And then one day, eventually, after a while of being tortured by anxiety, 24/7 dread level, I couldn't stop thinking about it, that kind of thing. Um, One day it just disappeared. So brain development, I don't know what was going on there, but I had it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Academics were easy. So the demand of school for me were fine, right? Because that was the easiest part of the whole thing. It was the people, right? Now, my parents were chill. They were probably neurodivergent themselves. They were kind of oblivious to what was going on with me, but they thought I was perfect. So they didn't add any stress, right? And they also didn't try to control me or force me to do things, right? Like into things that I didn't want to do. So that was cool. But yeah, I probably socially would have qualified as autistic back when I was those ages. Um, I was into trying to learn people. I started masking in middle school. And I even kind of remember the point at which I might have gone down the schizoid track more than the autism track. Is I always used to being the bullied girl and the nobody likes me kind of girl.
Mhm.
Um, but I had an awesome prom dress one year, and I heard a day later, I got my stoner rocker goth boyfriend to take me to the prom, and I heard that I was being talked about because I did have an unusual dress. I did like an evening cocktail dress
Mhm.
rather than those fluffy things, right? And
Yeah,
that were
something you
in.
found aesthetically pleasing for yourself.
Yeah, and it was just kind of like, wait, what, me? People looking at me and liking me? This may, and I remember realizing that I could build a self, right? They didn't need to have anything about my real self. They didn't like my real self anyway, right? And if I could put a date on it, that's what I would, or an event on it. My true self
Oh,
and my false self
oh,
came out.
so the masking
Yeah.
that you
So
started developing. So that's when you started kind of realizing, oh, look, I can put on a front that's actually
that's
pretty
when I
convenient to
really
have.
embraced it. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. But so is there anything like because one thing I'm trying to suss out here that I'm curious about is when it comes to the schizoid, oftentimes the assumption is that it develops because of a variety of psychological difficulties and traumas in early life, right?
Mhm.
So what's interesting is you're outside of this anxiety that you can't quite pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. You're saying it wasn't coming from your parents.
Correct.
They weren't instilling all this anxiety in you. They weren't like, and so what's interesting is that where would you say in your experience was all this anxiety now with all in hindsight, where was all this anxiety coming from?
I would say a core neurodivergence, whatever that would have been called when I was a kid. So a core neurodivergence, and the way I was treated by
Could you
other
explain
kids.
that, by the way, just in case somebody doesn't know what that is?
Yeah, just because kind of like you said before, I agree with you that for a lot of these things I can't claim 100%, but for a lot of schizoid and autisms and like all kinds of things, there is, the a child's born this way essentially, right?
Mhm.
Which is hard enough on its own, depending on what kind of characteristics, you were born with. But the world, quote unquote, the world exacerbates it, right? And if it wasn't a disorder before, it can, the trauma of that can be the part that turns it into a disorder. And maybe the way different minds, kind of like solve similar problems, right? And that's one of my theories, is that PDA and schizoid might have an original neurodivergent problem to solve, which is whatever, right? Like, is
Yeah,
it autistic like, or is it the abstract? Like,
yeah.
are we,
Over
you know,
some people argue that it's oversensitivity, like an actual hyper emotional sensitivity from early childhood.
could be that, could
That
include that, I'd say.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of ideas as to like where, but there is definitely a nature component. I agree. That is obviously not quite understood 100% yet.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. So I just find it kind of wholesome to think that you were able to use your own struggles as a neurodivergent child in a very neurotypical social environment and everything that obviously led to a variety of troubles and difficulties, and some would argue, and I would argue, trauma, that you are now basically using to help your own child navigate that so that they're not in that same position, right?
Exactly.
Of like essentially environmentally exacerbated terror and discomfort.
Right.
So yeah, that's very wholesome. Um, in any case, I do want to ask as well, um, how, oh, this is actually, I'm very curious about this. How did you manage your own difficulties as someone that's now diagnosed schizoid, um, when you first became a mother, and then as you sort of, because a lot of people ask that all the time. They're like they'll ask me because I'm a father of two girls, and they'll ask me like how is it that you like how do you deal with that, like you're having a child and then also having this kind of like autonomy driven, like, because essentially you have to sacrifice a certain amount of autonomy to cater to the needs of a child, right? To
Hmm.
some degree, if you know what I'm saying. That's it's
Yeah.
seemingly, but maybe you disagree. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Um, let's see. I'm writing down notes to myself. First of all, the first couple of years, I would say the first year for sure, that the biggest of having a baby is completely, it messed me. It was not for me, right? Like whatever it is, like
Mm,
this, crying little blob.
I love it. Go ahead.
I couldn't have done it without my husband. For
Yeah.
him, he was like, "Oh, that's easy. It's three things: they're hungry, diaper, or sleep." Right? And for him, it was a piece of cake. So he actually was like more of the greater provider between those ages.
Oh,
1 to 1.5, or I'm sorry, 0 to 1.5, or whatever kind of thing. So because it was super easy. Once they started kind of getting mobile and a little bit communicative and everything, then that's when I started being able to handle that kind
that was
of
your
thing.
time to shine. right there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's like I can reason with this, right? It's starting to show logic, you know. Um,
yeah,
so I
capability of thinking. Yeah,
you know, so I couldn't have done it without him and his, super chillness. Um, the other thing about the autonomy is that I have, I'm not sure what you'll think about this, but I have a complete and total ownership over the idea of autonomy. And this is actually something that also happened in high school when I felt like, if I went schizoid at any particular point, that's when it was, is back then and to this day, I decided I'm going to emotionally, cognitively, and everything withdraw from every requirement of me ever in this life.
mhm.
And I will then selectively re engage at my discretion.
Yeah,
So, like for me, it's a psychological autonomy, kind of like,
mhm.
I sent you my MCMI five
Yeah,
scores or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
the high narcissism is kind of that piece of it where I'm like, I reserve the right at all times to withdraw from anything, right? That if somebody else missteps, right? Like I don't believe in trying to save toxic relationships with family members. It's like screw that, right? I ain't gonna deal with that, So I feel like I'm entitled to full autonomy, and I feel like that, believe it or not, with my kids.
Yeah.
I
Do
feel
you
like
feel that all people are entitled to full autonomy?
um it would be nice in a nice perfect world
No, I know,
actually.
but I'm saying, like,
I,
is that
I
like a philosophical like position you would have that all people should have full autonomy?
I wish. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish.
Okay. Okay.
But I don't know if they can handle it, right?
No,
But
that's a lot of work, but yeah.
yeah. That's what has given me the sense of safety to proceed into things like I feel fully that I can change my mind if I want this, and this made parenting easier, by the way, because I experimented, right? I can change my mind. I'll try this. Oh, that didn't work. I'll try that. Oh, that didn't work. Right. Um, and that if anybody were to try to say, well, you're not being consistent, well, screw off, because I'm doing what I'm going to do, right? That I call best, which is a really important thing, maybe that I'll insert here about PDA parenting. So there's a lot of pressure from other adults, other parents, other, the teachers and the school systems and everything to like parent more traditionally, right? And so a lot of the parents feel like they're, left out to dry because they've got this kid that it's like, you don't understand. I can't discipline them enough
Well,
to get them to, to comply. And if I do, I'm just going to pay for it the next day when they melt down again, right?
mhm.
Um, so I didn't have that parental sense of pressure. That's part of why one of the many reasons I got to a schizoid diagnosis later was I was just like, yeah, who cares about what these other parents think?
Mhm.
Like, almost in a way where I know I'm not fathoming it. I'm not experiencing it. Other
Yeah.
parents talk about the pressure and they feel like they're being looked at, and I'm going,
Yeah, you're the fuck.
like,
I mean, I feel the same way about my own kids and the idea. Like I never, ever think about other parents.
yeah,
Ever. It doesn't even like I see other parents. I don't have an urge to replicate what any other parents do. I don't have an urge to compare myself to other parents. I don't care if somebody's comparing themselves to me or my parenting style. Like all that sort of stuff just is automatically and intuitive to me. So I
yeah,
understand what that means.
yeah,
Like I think a lot of schizoids probably are afraid that that's not like a possible way of parenting, right? They think they would probably have to integrate or involve themselves in all these other dynamics that are generally associated with being a parent and taking your child to school or somewhere where you have to deal with other parents and their judgments and their assumptions about you and what you do, and also contending with the state and what they expect education or parenting should look like, right? So it is interesting because, like, I'd imagine that the way you parent, even though it's highly conducive to your PDA child, it would be considered to be like a not good way to establish certain boundaries with your child, and it would be considered like a negative, right? In a more neurotypical like environment or exchange.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that interesting, right? But just not giving a shit about it is probably one of the best things you can do.
Right.
Um, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
And oh yeah, and I was just gonna say, if I were neurotypical, one of the things that would enter into the relationship between me and my son would be him seeing that I feel obligated to the rest of society, perhaps and probably more than him. But because that's not, you know, my core style, that's, he doesn't need to worry about that, right? He knows that through all his troubles, I'm on, quote unquote, his side,
Mhm,
right? If we're going to talk about going to school and getting grades and doing homework, we're going to talk about, does this make sense to you? Right? What do you want to get out of it? Here's what generally happens after you graduate high school. So we can, it's all about planning and controlling the world and being good at it, and everything like that. But it's it's not because we're part of a society. We're not a group, does that make
No,
sense? Like
no,
it's
I know what you mean. I mean, you're always going to be, we're in a society. I mean, that's always going to be the case,
basically,
but, and you have to navigate it, obviously, right? You
yeah,
guys aren't just like in an isolate, you're not living in a, what it called a vacuum. But I understand what you mean. Like the things that are motivating, your relationship with your child are not coming from outside intervention or concerns. They're coming primarily uh, from the needs of the child, and probably secondary would be your own needs on how that you're comfortable, parenting and your child. And you know what I mean. It's like it's a combination of both. Um, but still, the least important factor is the social pressures that exist, because I mean, honestly, those pressures are just oftentimes, I'm guessing, feel kind of irrelevant, uh, or just kind of counterproductive if you were
yeah.
try to worry about them. Like, it would probably be really difficult for you to even pretend to care about them, I'm guessing.
Right, yeah.
Um,
Then it becomes all kind of, it feels icky.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which, by the way, is just something that, again, kind of coincidentally, I see as an overlap. PDA kids are often regarded, and I think this is true, as being so much more vested in something's intrinsic value
Mhm,
than the larger expectation that they do a thing, right? So they're not going to go to school or do their homework because their parents expect them to, or society expects them to, or whatever, right? If they're going to go because they've set their sight on a goal, right? Or the
or
thing,
no, go ahead,
yeah.
sorry.
If they're going to go on a field trip or something, they're usually not going to do it because they're expected to. They're going to do it because they like the place that you're going, you know.
So would you say one of the best ways to, um, if you were trying to convince a PDA child of anything, would be, not even convince them, but to actually see if they want to take part in it, is to avoid the demand, obviously, and just explain the various contents
Yeah,
of what that activity or thing can provide or is available, right? So if it's like learning math, it's like, oh, you have to learn math because it's important to learn math. It's like, that's not going to work. It
right.
what might work is, oh, you learning math is a good thing because then you can make better decisions about how much stuff you want and need, and then you can count things, which makes it easier to, like, figure out stuff like, how much money I need to get back from the person that I paid money to, or, how much of that medicine I have to take, right?
Yeah,
So I don't get sick.
but
Um,
that's half of it.
yeah.
That's the behavioral half, which, like I
Okay.
said, it's still there. It's whatever you talk, it's just half of it. The other half of it is the relationship, so there, that's the behavioral. Then there's that self stuff, and that's where the magic, I think, and the power is. My son listens to me, and he only listens to me because of that deeper place
The
or more,
trust.
yeah, of trust. Yeah. And that's so much harder to maybe explain, but it's so much more valuable, right? And that's what opens the gateway so that when you do say something about, math or the weather, or, going to school or college or whatever, you want them to be like, right? You want them to, you want to have the credibility enough that they listen to your
Yeah,
recommendation.
you have to build trust, you have to build credibility with your own
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and what's funny is that I think that that's probably something that would probably be very much difficult for a neurotypical parent to have to do. And probably a lot easier for someone that, is schizoid, because those are the kind of parameters that you would have motivated or interested or built trust and credibility with you and someone else, right?
Mhm.
Or you and an authority or parental figure, is the very things you're attempting to provide here that you're describing. So
Right.
that's interesting, and that's what seems to be working. And I
Yep.
mean, that's evidential enough that there's something you're doing right
Yeah.
as far as that goes. So here, I know we're getting kind of near the end here, so I do want to get a couple of things out here really quick here. What are some of the what is some advice? Let's just say, what is some advice that just give out some, just don't give it all away, right? Because
Then you're
it's
putting me out of
part
my
of your,
question.
yeah. But don't give it all away. But like, and I'm sure it's more complicated than just saying a sentence or two. What is some advice that you would give parents if they suspect that their child is somebody that's dealing with this sort of PDA situation? Like, what sort of signs should they look out for that can maybe differentiate it from just a kid just being rebellious, or a kid just kind of just more conventional, like what's it called, boundary testing, right? Like,
Mhm.
what sort of signs or behaviors do you think would point toward, oh, maybe there's a little more to this that a parent could look out for if they suspect something like this?
Well, one of the first signs is obviously that they can't win, right? Like that's the demand avoidant part of it, right? They're trying to do the typical stuff, right? The threats and the, count to three and whatever. Kids,
What are some threats that a child
you
would
know,
use?
you better, you better do this or else, or I'm going to take, or no dinner, right? Or no dessert, or go up to your room, and like just anything typically, that a parent thinks that they
I'll
can,
hold my breath or something,
you
right?
know,
Or
so, well, the parent, kind of thing. Like, and there's a lot of little fights, especially when they're little, that I hope that parents will recognize as really important, because I think a lot of times they assume that your child is much more malevolent than their child actually is. And,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so I'll give you a little story. My little 4-year-old, she's 5 now, went through about a 1 month phase of needing us to put her socks on for her, right? And my husband's first inclination was to kind of be like, well, no, you know how to put your socks on, you put your socks on, right? Thus engaging in a conflict. But we're smarter parents now, thanks to my 12-year-old and everything. And I said, hold on. I'm willing to bet that can you put my socks on for me when she knows how to do it is something else, right? Is that it's not about the socks. We're thinking it's about the socks. For her, it's about some sort of insecurity. It's, do you still love me? Or are we okay? Or I just feel a little weird right now. I said, just don't go down the path of, oh, what am I teaching her if we put her socks on for you? Like, traditional parenting will take parents down those doom and gloom routes. Like, if you don't do this now, kind of. And I said, I'm willing to bet if we answer the question by putting on her socks for her, that she's actually asking, which is that, yes, we'll put your socks on for you. It'll self-extinguish because it's going to help with the anxiety rather than the socks. And I was
Hmm.
right. It disappeared about a month later.
And then they start just putting on their own socks.
Yeah. Right. And so I think traditional parenting can sometimes, especially if it's too soon, right? Like maybe when they're teenagers, they can handle it better, but little guys like that, right? Especially if you're born neurodivergent, which I think you and I are totally on board with happening a lot. If you're born neurodivergent, you're going to have some inexplicable anxieties that you just want your parent to somehow try to make it go away, but you don't know have any other way.
You can't explain it. You can't.
So you ask for them to put your socks on for you or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Kind of thing. But parents aren't, and that's where the value of all this, abstract psychology of the self stuff comes in, right? Is parents are still living in the land of, well, she knows how to put her socks on, and all this kind of like, you
Yeah,
know,
I sorry, I
yeah.
didn't. Did you say you have a daughter as well? I didn't know this.
Mhm.
So you have
Oh,
a
sorry.
12-year-old son.
I've
So the
procreated.
son has you 3 times. Okay.
Yeah.
See, I didn't. I never got this information. Okay, so how is your son the only one that was you would say was PDA?
Yeah. So 12 is the oldest first, my most nervous child, right? I was new mom. He's the PDA.
Okay.
Then my 9 is ADHD.
Uh-huh.
So, but we use a lot of the same strategies raising him too. We
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
use the same
To
strategies.
navigate the impulse stuff, right? I'm
Yeah.
guessing. Yeah.
And then the little girl who now she's totally different in some different ways, but she shows some little bits and pieces of PDA, kind of like the sock thing,
Uh-huh.
right? Where she kind of, I can tell she's a little insecure here and there.
Hmm.
We're just handling it so much different with her now because
It it just makes sense because, like, I mean, I always think about that. Like, there is, I mean, if you're a neurodivergent parent, there's a very distinct chance that you're going to have neurodivergent kids.
yeah.
And now, to what degree and to what in what ways, who knows? If you got two neurodivergent parents, if they both don't even realize they are or have navigated it in other ways and coped with it, then yeah, you're gonna get some nice little mixed kids there, cognitive mixtures and stuff. So yeah, anyway, so that's interesting. So you would say some of the various ways that you already sort of described their behaviors, just kind of what a parent should be looking out for if they suspect PDA. Just kind of like
Um,
the kind of argumentative nature, the sort of negotiative sort of positions the child will take, the threats they might make.
it's not always argumentative, and that's the weird part about PDA is because there's a lot of questions about oppositional defiant disorder, which does
Yeah,
seem to kind of come from a different place, right? It doesn't That's not typically associated with autism or neurodivergence, and
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but yeah, it's just like they can't even seem to do things that they want. Sometimes there's all kinds of things. They'll be super controlling. Like they'll try to tell their parents when to go to the bathroom and things like that, right? Stand here
Like
and do,
just really random
like,
arbitrary
yeah,
things.
some
No,
kids
no,
are,
stand here, not here.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Some kids want every toy there is, but it doesn't help, right? Some kids will flip flop, and this is a schizoid thing that I thought was really interesting, because I read schizoid stories about things like this too, where like for example, a PDA kid will have wanted XYZ gift for his birthday or something like that, right? And he gets it, but little sister plays with it first. And from that point forward, it's absolutely ruined. He won't touch it. He doesn't want it anymore. It's done for. And he really won't go back and play with it. And so, and that's baffling to parents, obviously, because it was like, she opened the box first, like, what happened, so inconsistencies like that I think are very kind of like schizoid in nature, having to do with those boundaries of self. So that's something you may see. And then on the advice for the parents stuff, right? I would probably look more broadly at the anxiety than at the thing. Like, so, I had a really great psychology instructor once say that you can't get enough of something you don't need. Meaning, so for the kid who's like trying to get every toy there is, that's because he's not trying to get every toy. He's trying to chase the anxiety away.
Speaking of kids, Give me 1 second here.
I locked my door. Apparently you did not learn.
No, I don't have a door to lock. It's like a sliding
Okay.
door thing. Hold on, where's mommy? 1 second. I'm keeping all that in. Anyway, it's relevant. It's just it's just she literally came out and said, mommy's doing something, she's busy, and I have to go poop. And I know that I can't wipe myself too good yet, so I need your help. And so if I would have just said, hey, you can't be in here, you gotta go, like,
Yeah,
it would have been its own issue. But anyway, sorry about that.
oh,
It's hilarious that it happens right now as we're talking about parenting.
Yeah,
I have to have a little parenting moment. So yeah, I told her, the way I convinced her to go back is that I said, I'm gonna finish up in here and then I'll go ahead and my attention is gonna go right to you. And so that's oh Lord. Okay, but I need you to close it for now, please.
No, go with me.
Go with you?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go with you when I'm done. I'm almost done.
No, go. Go with me right now.
Okay, can I finish one more question and then I'll go with you?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you right now, okay?
Don't do it.
Okay.
yeah.
Oh my. Okay. So all right, the last question, luckily I'm at the end here. The last question I had was what was my last? No, I'm not done yet.
You one more question.
Okay, yeah, but you gotta let me ask it first.
No, we did.
No, I haven't done it.
We did.
Okay, we will. Okay, I'll just ask it while she's right here being a crazy person. I don't like you on camera, girl. So
What did you make here?
okay, you know what? I might have to just end it here. I don't think I can. I don't think I can continue here because I mean I don't know where mom went. She's probably went out there to do the laundry or something.
She's at the store.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where she's at. Okay, well, in any case, let's go ahead and finish this up. It wasn't anything you didn't already discuss anyway. I'd like to you to have a chance to again reiterate what your work is, what you do, where people can see you, your social media, whatever else you want. Go ahead and mention it.
Yeah, so PDAMamaBear.com. You can email me at PDAMamaBear@gmail.com, right? So go check out my blog, my blogs. I even have a podcast out on neurodiversitypodcast.com, but that's at my website if you want to find it.
Mm-hmm.
I
We'll
do
put all the links in the description.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I do some stuff for PDA North America.com too. So yeah. Send me your questions and your observations. I would love it.
Okay. My daughter's like, who's the lady? No, yeah, it's a nice lady I'm talking to. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll have the links in the description, and then we'll go from there. Maybe we can have talks in the future if that's something you're interested in.
One more.
I said one more question. Yes, I know. I'm all done. Don't worry. All right. Thank you very much. Have an awesome day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.